Carrie Hopper, and I am the Associate Director of the Aspen Institute's program on citizenship and American identity. And tonight I'm also here representing a project called the Better Arguments Project. And this is a collaboration by 3 groups: the Aspen Institute, an education organization called Facing History and Ourselves, and Allstate. And through the Better Arguments Project, we are working in partnership with communities to try to bridge ideological divides. And we try to do so not by papering over those divides, not by avoiding those divides, but by engaging them directly through argument. And we believe that those arguments in civic life today need to be better. And we believe that what that means is arguments that are more emotionally intelligent, more honest about power, and more rooted in history, and arguments that practice principles of constructive communication. So I have 2 wonderful individuals here with me tonight who I understand have been practicing better arguments with one another for several years, and I'm really happy to discuss this topic with them in the North Dakota context today. So please welcome State Superintendent Kirsten Baesler and Fargo City Commissioner John Strand. So let's set the stage a little bit about arguments in North Dakota. You know, we hear so often about civic arguments at the national level, and we know all about those, but we also know that North Dakotans are experiencing issues in their own way for good reason. So I wonder if you each might share some examples of some of the most contentious issues in North Dakota today and why these issues are so important to North Dakota's identity.
Certainly. I can start if you don't mind, John.
You sure may.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, you know, there's a number of, obviously, since the role that I play as the state superintendent, it's my responsibility to manage the education of our young people when they enter our school system, whether that be a preschool in some of our communities or kindergarten in other communities, all the way through 12th grade. And it really is important for us. Our students see what's going on in the national level, and unfortunately, they don't have a very good model right now to understand what civil discourse is and how to have those good arguments. And so we take that very seriously in education. Because of the nature of the work that we do, all issues tend to impact our young people. It's their future, whether we're talking about workforce development or immigration issues or EL languages within our schools or the economy. All of those issues are going to impact our young people. And so I don't know that I could pick one particular issue that is more or less contentious than any of those, because they all do seem to touch our young people and their families in one way or another. If I would have to describe what I see in our school districts and in our state from that state level perspective, is the fact I think that we have 2 different factions going on right now within our school systems and within our communities. Those that have real strong arguments for wanting and desiring that North Dakota stay the same, and then the other side of wanting and needing North Dakota to be different. And that really does present itself very, very clearly and strongly within our school systems. You have a group of parents and families that's saying, it worked for me, and we don't want to take a chance on changing anything within our schools. And then you have another group of people that are voicing strongly that we cannot prepare our young people based on our past. We need to prepare them for their future. And so I think that's probably the underlying current of, do we change? How do we change? And for what reason?
Thank you.
When I was a kid growing up, the biggest, most contentious thing was whether you're Catholic or Lutheran. and now that's expanded a lot, but it kind of sets the tone for how do you, when you're not all the same, get on the same bus to go to school, for example, and sit in the same classrooms and learn next to each other, and do your work in your communities and get along with each other with your real fundamental differences. So that was my precursor. Looking at North Dakota today in our region, you know, I'm from a little town out there, and I'm guessing a lot of you are from little towns out there. We're not all from the big city of Fargo. We're from small rural parts. So there's always been this issue of urban versus rural in the state. There's always been this issue of east versus west in this state. There's always been this sense of one end of the state maybe having it better than others, like when agriculture was king and there was no oil or coal, imperial caste became a phrase or an item, a concept. And of course, that now we've bridged across to the state. But looking at us now, these differences are really our opportunities to come together. And we have a lot of differences, contentious issues, in my opinion, that I see and that are unfolding all the time. For example, race. There was a point in time, North Dakota, I was told once, maybe 1950 or 1960, had 64 African Americans in the census. Well, that's changed, and a lot has changed. But so race is a really big issue, and there's so many elements of race. It's not just skin color and ethnicity. It's also spirituality and religion and background. And we saw that last year with the protests a couple years ago at the Standing Rock. The real fundamental differences in viewpoints on development and oil and then conflicting with spirituality of a people. And how well do we do at getting along with each other or hearing each other or learning from each other or honoring each other rather than just dissing each other and pointing fingers at each other and saying somebody's right and somebody's wrong and somebody has to win. Because when you have winners, you have losers. And our history is full of a lot of winners, but it's full of a lot of losers. Another issue I think that's implicit in today in North Dakota, and this might sound odd coming from a guy, but women's issues and women's access to opportunity and to similar pay and similar jobs and respect and access to the avenues to the top. And we have these ceilings where women just can't get, some will say it's at 17% or so, you just can't get past that. Well, I think that's a contentious issue in our state. We have some other things to note with poverty and versus wealth. We have people who have different levels of social capital or economic basis to work from and from which to go. And so these all are fundamental bases for us to be aware of when we're with each other and interacting with each other and learning from each other. And the list is endless, but those are just some of the fundamental ones that I've noted over my time.
And given these absolutely important issues that you each just named, in this context that we're in our country today and in North Dakota today, where sometimes it feels like the social fabric is just tearing apart, why do you think it's still important to be able to have these arguments? And what, in your words, would it look like for North Dakota to be able to have better arguments?
So again, I'm going to come at it from the perspective of the people that I hang out with the most, and that's our students, our young people in this state. They critically need to. This generation is a generation that I've seen never before in my 29-year history in education. They care more deeply. They want to make a difference. Obviously, they want to be well-educated, well-prepared for life, and have enough money to be happy and successful. But they truly care about their community, about each other, about their state, about the bigger, larger world that they are part of. They need our help in setting that table for them to have the opportunities to not only understand and see and witness good civic arguments, good civil discourse, and they also need the opportunity to practice those things with structure and guidance. John spoke about the DAPL protest. That's 35 miles from where I grew up. That was my friends and family that were down there. And I understood that there were two different opinions, but those were real people that just had reached a point where it had gone so far and they weren't able to sit down and have a better argument about that. And lots of things went into play with that. Those friends and family that were involved in that, they had never been engaged like I had the opportunity to be engaged. My father was on the Planning and Zoning Commission. My mother was involved in all sorts of civic activities. As a 5, 6, 7-year-old, I was taken to all those meetings. It was not unusual for me to go into planning and zoning meetings, show up at a city commission meeting, go to a board meeting. So I knew and I was familiar with that. But those friends and family, when they got that notice about there's going to be a public hearing on the 12th floor on the Capitol at this day, they didn't have that same experience that I had or that exposure. And so what they were left with was kind of to a point where they missed all the opportunities for a better argument along the way, and then it led to protest. And once you get to that emotional point, our minds shut down. And so there's very little opportunity to really find the resolution and the solution that is so necessary. And so that's been my mission since then, as I work with young people and educators across the state, to say, we need to have opportunities for, regardless if a student is of another color or of poverty, students in poverty have 80% fewer occurrences in civic engagement than those that are from a two-family middle income. We have to make sure that those young people have the model of us doing it well, so then when they become our next leaders. So I believe it's very important. They want to do it. It's up to us to make sure they have the opportunities to engage.
That question really perplexes me, and I might spin a little bit, but you know, we're a small town, and one of the reasons to have better arguments is we have to go look at each other tomorrow. We're going to be running into each other in the street. We're going to have coffee together. We're going to have breakfast together. We're going to see each other routinely at social events, and we're going to bump into each other all the time. So we need to respect each other. And we're not this big, huge, vast city where nobody ever knows anybody. We're different here. We're North Dakota, and we get to know each other, and we do know each other. So let's leverage that, and let's take that and go, okay, what's it take when you have everybody to have everybody rise up? Not just some, not just a few, but everybody rises up. You know, when some do better, others do better, but we all do better when everybody does better. You know, so this notion of a better argument or a better discussion, it's in my head, it's just simply stop and listen. Pay attention to who's there. Pay attention to who's not there. Not only hear the voices that you're hearing, but ask yourselves, who are we not hearing? And how do we get that present in our discussion? Because that's a better argument. And the word argument suggests conflict and fights and wins and losses and black eyes and, you know, bludgeoning each other. I don't know that that's what an argument is. An argument should be based on respect, on extracting from others their viewpoints honestly in a safe space. You know, listening to them and not just giving them lip service and pretending you're listening. Those are better arguments. Many minds make better decisions if you're engaging each other. And that's a better argument.
And I would say if you don't want to do it for the person that you're engaging with this civil discourse or this argument with, do it for yourself, because I thrive on differing opinions, and when someone doesn't see something quite exactly the way that I see it, if I take the time to dig into finding out why or the who or the what, I walk away a smarter person with more information that only enriches my day and my life. So if you can't do it for the person that you're arguing with or having that discourse with, do it for yourself.
Yeah. And that's really interesting too, because as two elected officials, you know, we as Americans hear somewhat conflicting opinions about what we should look for in an elected official. You know, on the one hand, we are seeking moral integrity, and on the other, you know, we are taught and incentivized to seek candidates who can defeat the opponent. And, you know, I wonder from your vantage point, John, as an elected official, in a somewhat unique position in a nonpartisan position, how do you reconcile those two things, and how do you practice what Kirsten just described as really encouraging that kind of deliberation within yourself and your office?
Well, I relish in the fact that, and maybe you do too, that we're in nonpartisan positions. I'm guessing we have a common thought, most of us, that it's just gotten so toxic out there that it's hard to function positively, and it's hard to see avenues and opportunities when the negativity is so prevalent. So I love the local bring it down to the to each other level, where it doesn't matter what party you are or what your political affiliations are. You just listen to each other and learn from each other. And you have that at a bigger level, at the public education superintendent level. But here in Fargo, the day-to-day things that people come to you aren't those great big burning issues always. It's often something as simple as, we have a neighbor we're having trouble resolving a difference with. They're putting all their junk in their yard, and how do we resolve this? Or we have a pothole in our front yard, and they won't fix it. These little things are everything to people, and they aren't hills to die on, and you don't have to always be on this path of the great political argument and the great political fight. It's just be listening to each other and pay attention to each other.
And Kirsten, as state superintendent, you represent every family in the state. And I wonder if you might share a bit about how, in the education settings, you are supporting educators and students to develop and practice these skills, which so often are outside of the realm of a typical curriculum.
This is true. So, families are so very important. Families are our children's first and most influential teachers, and so it's very important that we engage them. The opportunities that I've been able to create for my students first, I'll share that with you. I have a state superintendent student cabinet that I started shortly in my first term of elected office. It's a group of young people from across the state, every corner of the state, north, south, east, and west, big schools, small schools, large schools, people from Fargo, students from West Fargo and Fargo, students from Horse Creek Elementary in western North Dakota that has 8 students. And so they come together and meet quarterly with me. And it's a full day at the Capitol. I clear my calendar. It's a working lunch. And these students are brought together for me to do exactly what John just recommended, is to listen. I'd spent 24 years in classrooms and hallways of schools prior to being elected, and every time I made a decision that impacted our students and our families, I was able to immediately go to work the next day and see the effect that had. Was it a good impact? Was it a positive impact, a negative impact? Suddenly, I'm at the Capitol on the 11th floor, and my primary customers, my students and their families, are no longer, don't have access to, and so I'm making bigger decisions that are more relevant and have a broader sweep of impact and effect, yet I don't have that feedback. And so created the student cabinet, and as I said, they're 4th grade to freshmen in college, and they have a diverse set of backgrounds, and they bring to the table a diverse set of experiences. So you put these young people in a room, they are so engaged. And they, as I said, they're north, south, east, and west. They have they have 700 in some of their school class sizes, and others have 1 in their class. So there's diversity, there is different experiences, there's western North Dakota, eastern North Dakota, all the things that brings to the table. They set the agenda, and they talk about things that are important to them, and then they advise me on issues that I bring to them that will impact their future. To be able to watch that happen in real time and to have their feedback, but to see them engage, they have taken, this is the 3rd cohort, it's an 18-month term that they serve, and they can serve up to 2 terms. So now I'm on my 3rd cohort. I'm so happy to report that many of these young people have taken this back to their local school districts, and our local school districts are now honoring that same sort of dynamic work group within their school districts. And so that's what we're doing for students in their school districts. We consistently are talking about engagement, and we talk about communication, involvement, engagement, empowerment. And that's the journey that we need to take all of our families as they engage. First you communicate, the next level of growth is to involve, then you can engage, and finally is to empower each individual with their own voice, whether it be a family member or a student or a teacher. So.
I wonder if you each might share a personal story about a time in your work or your life where you have needed a better argument. Maybe you had one and it worked, it was a bright spot. Maybe you needed one and it didn't happen. Any examples come to mind?
I'm reminded of a situation about 20 years ago. Many of us will recall this perhaps, where a woman named Cheryl Tenderlin was murdered by a young Hispanic fellow. And I was up on the northern end of the valley, but I can tell you this, the tensions among the people were really high, even up in Grafton where I was, and I was at the newspaper there. So the topics rippled across the communities, the distrust, the anger, the feeling that somebody was so wronged that somebody was murdered, and the walls came down. There weren't many limits in people's abilities to not judge each other. So in Grafton, we had this bubbling up, and there was a woman there, Sister Donna Jean Sheppy, who was from the Presentation Sisters, who was there on a ministry, and she and I were looking at how do we do this? How do we approach this? And we decided to bring some of these families together that were vocally talking about how bad the other sides were. But what nobody expected was that we also, through her outreach, had some Hispanic mothers and families there. And when one of the moms from the other side said, well, she told a story about, she looked out in her yard and these kids were beating up her kid, and how difficult it was for her to intercede and to pull the child away, and the risk and the dynamic of this fight out in her yard, which maybe was to a degree racially driven. But I don't think the groups knew that each other had the same thoughts, that they had the exact same issues, they had the same desires, the same concern. They wanted their kids to be safe, and they wanted to get along with each other, and they realized that it was mutual. But until we got them together and were listening, that mutuality wasn't so evident. That's an old story, but it's still, I think, pretty relevant today.
So my share, I think, has been a lesson that I learned, an effective lesson that I learned that I've brought to the Capitol, and the conversations, sometimes difficult, but critical, crucial conversations that must be had on difficult issues. I'll take you back to set some context. I was on the Mandan School Board for 9 years. I was the school board president for 7 of those years. At that time, the Mandan School Board and the Mandan Teachers Union had gone to impasse for 3 negotiation sessions in a row, which meant for the better part of 7 years, our school board and our teachers hadn't been able to come to an agreement and were working under some really stressful situations. And you could see the effect that was having on our students' achievement and on just the morale of our teachers and the culture of our school district. And as a result, when big people are worried about big people problems, little people that they're supposed to be teaching kind of get forgotten, and there's only so much resource and energy to go around. And so our students' achievement and our scores were really declining. And I decided to run for the school board at that time to think I could make a difference. I was working as a teacher and a vice principal in Bismarck at the time, and I thought I could bring something new to the table. And so we had to go through another year of impasse, but then my second year on the board, I became president. And at that point, I just thought the culture needed to change, and the way that we were working with each other for a common denominator of young people needed to change. And so as a board, we have a 9-member board in Mandan. We had a 9-member board, still do. They do. I'm not part of it anymore. But 9-member board. And so we as a board made a commitment to say, you know what, we've got to do this differently. And so the board began volunteering with our teachers. We helped them decorate the gymnasium for prom, and we would work in the concession stands alongside our teacher advisors. And I'm telling you, when you're cleaning up pop spills and popcorn machines overflow and you're hanging crepe paper in a gym, you're laughing, you're having a good time. Those are bonding experiences. And so suddenly it wasn't that board does this or those teachers do that. We were suddenly Mandan community citizens working together and cleaning up pop spills together. So did it make the contentious issues go away? Did it make the difficult budget conversations disappear? Of course not. Those are still crucial, critical conversations that must be had. But when you have established the relationship and seen past a label of a board or a union and have begun to know each other as human beings and people, we had already begun the negotiation work ahead of where we had ever been before, because we were people working to find a solution rather than that board or those teachers.
I'm going to chime in here for just a moment, too. A lot of us don't see problems as opportunities, but problems are opportunities. When we have a problem, it gives us a moment to find a resolution. So when I was new to the school board in 2008, and Kirsten was from Mandan, she was in a national role of leadership at the national school boards level because she had these problems, opportunities at the local Mandan level, and you're not only still sharing and teaching all others, but you're teaching the whole country how to take that conversation like you had there in Mandan and leverage it up for the greater good. And you did a great job on that, by the way.
Thanks. And I will add to that it didn't happen overnight, but by the time I left that office and became the state superintendent, Mandan's scores in reading and science were the best of the Class A in districts in the state. So that was the important goal.
That's the real measure.
That's the real measure.
And on that perfect note, we're going to open it up for Q&A. I think we have time for 2 questions, and we'll take them both at the same time. And our mic runners will go ahead and select the questions.
Getting my thoughts together here.
Uh-oh.
Well, I really like what you said, John, about reframing it not as an argument, but like a civil discourse. And then we're talking about our young people, but like we're not really talking about how are we going about teaching them to have civil discourse so that we don't have a longitudinal argument, but we can create something new by listening, being impacted, and then having them integrate what they hear into something new. Like, how are we teaching that to our young people?
That's a
Great question. Let's just take the other one, and then we'll answer them both. I think there's one over here.
I think in the spirit of better arguments, there's often shared understanding is a key component of that, and a curiosity to learn. Curious for both of you in your positions, if there's an opportunity for a summit or a learning or a subject matter where we're elevating the shared understanding on a topic, what would you choose to have that shared learning be about in the spirit of maybe greater discourse?
2 great questions. Teaching skills to young people and a summit on an issue.
So I'll start how we teach. So embedded within all of our social studies standards in North Dakota, this is kind of the scaling of it. So in kindergarten, the social studies standards, you need to learn about the community of kindergarten and first grade. And so that's the community. So they are learning how to function with each other. How do you take turns? You've probably seen the job roles. So those are, and then 2nd and 3rd grade is the community of your city, of your community. They visit city commissions, they go visit park boards, and 4th grade is obviously North Dakota history. So I think that there are opportunities in all of those social studies, and our teachers are doing a better and better job. Education is not the way that it was when I was in school, where you sit and get. Our teachers, our educators are setting up projects, and they're setting up opportunities for them to practice. So they practice, then they mimic. Most of our schools in our state start their day with what's called circle time, or sharing, and restorative justice. When you have been wronged, they are teaching those social emotional skills. I just think we need to do more of that, and we can't do it alone. I'm going to be right here to tell you that we need our community partners, and we would love to have opportunities to really be part of a city commission meeting, to actually kind of practice, give them a topic. I would also suggest, and we do much of this in North Dakota, is to ask our students what their social issues are. I'll give you one example of an 8th grade class that realized, an 8th grade science class, STEM is what the actual class was. They came back from summer vacation and they had noticed two things. There was a park located right next to their city swimming pool. And they saw a lot of homeless people there. And there were a lot of kids that had cell phones, and so there were no chargers. There was no electricity around in the park for either the homeless people that had a cell phone and or the young people that had their cell phones. Their project for the year was to create solar charging panels and build that within their city park. So that's just one example. They care about these things. Set up the opportunity to help them do that. To the second question, the issue that I would choose is mental health, behavioral and mental health. How we are really honestly tackling and addressing that issue for both our young people. I'll just share a statistic with you if I can, just really quickly. Since I've taken office, there's a survey that goes out to all of our young people. It's called the Youth Behavior Risk Survey, and I'm very proud of some of the decisions that our young people have been making. They're buckling up more, texting and driving less, having their first exposure to alcohol at later and later ages, use of tobacco declining, all the right trends in the right direction, right? The one that has been trending in the wrong direction since my time in office, my 7th year in office, has been more and more of our kids are feeling hopeless, sad, disconnected. More students are having thoughts of suicide, plans of suicide, and attempted suicides. And sadly, the rate for completed suicides. That is an issue that I think we need to talk about more openly and honestly, and not expect young people or adults to say, just get stronger. You're just being soft. So that's an issue. That would be the issue that I would choose.
I know our time is upon us, but as for a summit, I would suggest we have a discussion about the environment and North Dakota's role in it in the future. We're a big breadbasket, and we also have issues of energy now that are at the forefront, not only on our forefront, but nationally and globally. We need to balance our future with our present and not be acting out of fear that if the fossil fuels industry is diminished, we won't have a future, because I can assure you we have more sun and wind than we have oil and coal. So, but we have to have that conversation, and we have to open it up and listen to each other and plan a better future with changing times and technologies and sentiments in the world. As for your question about honoring kids, and I might not have heard it right, but I have the visual in my mind of Greta Thunberg sitting in Sweden, and this girl sitting for, 3 weeks in front of her city hall with her sign, demanding that her leadership change things so that the planet's better for a future generation. And let's look at the dynamic. You can go to social media, and I don't know, there's times I love social media, and there's times I just go, it's the darkest hole of humanity. But look at what the treatment this girl is getting from utmost respect, like she was in North Dakota last week and met Chief Arvo Looking Horse. And then on the other hand, you have people just demeaning her and ridiculing her and diminishing her and teasing her. And, come on, folks. If we can't do better than that and listen more respectfully, let's go back to the Catholic Lutheran thing, out of the mouths of babes. So let's listen to those young voices and honor them.
That's a perfect note to end on.